Hello, all. Welcome to Maker's Bar. I'm your host, Akshita Shetty, and today we have Versan with us, who's the founder of Black Swan Capitalist. Versan is coming back again on Maker's Bar because of the recent events that have happened in the world in terms of crypto and crypto strategy. So today we are going to talk to Versan about what does this all mean? And I am really excited to have Versan because he has educated me over the years, and I'm really excited to chat and talk with you. So welcome, Versan.
Hey, thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to connect, and there's a lot to talk about.
Yes, there's a lot to talk about today for sure. So I think a lot has happened. It's been like a year since we have spoken, right? Since the last recording. And a lot has happened since then. We have a president who is very pro crypto, which I don't even know what it means, but we will talk about that, right? And we have the European, the ECB and the European governments who are saying that they will not have reserves, and an American president who is saying that we'll have cryptocurrency reserves, right? Which I think 95% of the humans don't understand what it means because crypto is such an asset which is very hard to transact for 95% of the humans, right?
Mhm.
So tell me, let's start with CBDCs. And Donald Trump has signed something where he said that we are not going to pursue CBDCs in America, right? So what does CBDC mean? And I saw I was in India in 2023, and I saw India was issuing central bank digital currencies, but and then we had Europe, which is pushing for that as well, from what I understand. But I want to understand like what your thoughts are in terms of CBDCs.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, CBDC is a central bank digital currency. It's essentially a digital currency that is issued by a central bank.
Yeah.
Right now, the dollar is a central bank currency.
Yeah.
Right? It's issued by the central bank, so it's a liability of the central bank. The CBDC is no different.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would really say is, despite recent claims like from figures like Donald Trump that CBDCs are not going to occur and they won't happen, I think the global trend is telling us a very different story. If we look closely, we start to realize that central banks worldwide are actively exploring and testing CBDCs. So interestingly, even the Federal Reserve has noted that CBDCs would only be implemented in an emergency. That's very interesting. What kind of emergency, right? And that raises so many other questions, which would, of course, be a whole nother conversation that we could get into. But what kind of emergency? And if you look at the history and what has already transpired over the years from the pandemic, it shows that the crises are often preceded for major policy shifts, okay? So a lot of this stuff is done intentionally in order to bring in a solution that was initially created. The problem was created by the very same people trying to offer that solution. So the introduction of CBDCs is going to follow a very similar path, which is why they said it would be used in an emergency. And I think the outcome is it's not surprising to me, because if you look at the banking system and you look at the delinquencies and we look at the borrowing at all-time highs, the credit card spending, just to make ends meet, right? The majority of the population is already in a financial crisis. That wealth gap is widening so fast, and it's only accelerating with Trump in office. So while many in the crypto community and people in the truther community as well choose to focus more on speculative narratives and actually ignore the underlying issues, that's very dangerous, okay? Because they're not giving people a full picture, and the reality is clear. The larger the crisis is going to be, number one, the larger the wealth transfer is going to be, and the larger that wealth gap is going to widen. So CBDCs effectively are inevitable. And the reason I say this is because people are broke.
Okay. So you're saying that the American government will only pursue it if in case of an emergency, not otherwise. That's what at least Trump's executive order is mandating, right?
Well, I think that's really for the people to buy into there's always two kind of dramas taking place. And I think, even with the pandemic and I don't feel like people learn from their mistakes of understanding how these things play out in real time.
Yeah.
Um, the presidents, politicians will say anything they have to earn your trust.
Yeah.
Politicians lie all the time. In fact, to become a politician, you need to be a liar.
Yeah.
And when you focus on the bigger picture, you start to see that the regulatory environment is advancing. And if you look at those regulations very close, they're already building this foundation for they're trying to sell it as convenience, right? Trust-based
Yes.
financial system that's solidified. But the end game is really to create the consumer dependency. What they've done was genius. See, they've inflicted such economic hardships on us, making it almost expensive to hold on to cash, to hold on to other assets. So we're pushed into the system, right? At the same time, they're putting these mandates on the back end saying that, okay, well, we'll introduce a CBDC in an emergency. Well, if you look at the financial system and everything behind it, the whole thing's falling apart. So it seems like they're waiting for that catalyst to bring it in. However, what's interesting is, indeed, with everything going digital, central banks, and we're talking about derivatives, we're talking about stocks, we're talking about the bond market, et cetera, currencies, financial ecosystems, you can certainly say that this is the greatest wealth transfer in history that's occurring. The question is then, well, which technologies do I need to invest in? How to discern what is and what isn't going to be. So there's private cryptocurrencies that are being put aside for banks and financial institutions, the 1-2%ers, and they are creating another kind of technology, a central bank digital currency built on those same technologies that they're investing in, those private, for when there is a situation where the people need a solution and they're begging for one, which is why they've weaponized the food industry. And I don't want to go down those rabbit holes, but they're all tied in together.
Okay. So let me ask you this. So obviously there are these ISO coins, right, which I think are going to be the fundamental. And people who don't understand ISO coins and who are viewing this, please go ahead and understand what ISO coins are, right? Which is going to be the fundamental financial system that we would have in the future, right? Whenever that happens, right? And these coins are being used as like as you said, with the 2%ers or the 5%ers or whatever that percentage is, and then you have central bank digital currencies, which is for everyone, right? That kind of makes sense, perfectly makes sense if you look at it and you took a holistic view from there, right? But other than obviously to counteract terrorism and all kinds of things, all kinds of reasons that the governments give, right? Why do you think, like in a crisis, that a government would want to push CBDCs? Why is that? Like, why would people actually want to actually accept us? I mean, people were very happy accepting $2,000 checks from the government when COVID happened, right? So why would people accept CBDCs if at all there's a crisis, right? Why would they do that?
So number one, the reason they're pushing the CBDC, whether people want to acknowledge it or not, is about control.
Yeah.
Right? They want to create consumer dependency. That's the end game. It always has been. It's not a conspiracy. It's true.
Yeah.
As they take all the wealth from people. All right. The second thing is the reason they're pushing why people would want a CBDC is really about weaponizing the food industry, weaponizing goods and services. And when I say this, how do they weaponize it, right? If they can control all the water reserves, for instance, and they can control all the food, and we can see that the Gates Foundation is involved in a lot of this stuff. They're already co-opting these spaces, so that way even the most religious and overzealous people will conform and adhere to the new conditions of the new financial system, which is a digital ID and being able to monitor all your transactions, right? Some people call this the mark, right? I don't want to go down that rabbit hole either, but a lot of this is actually putting into place so that way, if they can weaponize the food industry, they can weaponize some of the service industry, medical industry as well. Then for you to get those services, for you to buy your food, you need to adhere to the new conditions of the new system. So hunger is something that people don't think about too much, because here in the US, we don't go really hungry, right? But if you look all over the world, people have been subjected to this for a very long time, right? So we don't know what it's like. We've never lived through a recession, our age, our generation. But they are actively putting this into motion to where even if you want to buy some food or something, you have to adhere to those new conditions for the
Yeah.
new system. So that's why people are going to want a CBDC. You're not going to allow your child to starve. And then, of course, most people don't know any better. They're not going to realize that this is a trap that's being set.
Actually, it doesn't affect, to be honest, like privacy and everything. Like I think my data is on social media, right? Like all this, all the companies, big social media companies. Obviously, I mean, our podcast is on a social media. I mean, is on a YouTube, right? Kind of probably understand a lot more about me than I do understand about myself. I would say.
Yeah,
So for 95% of the people, it would not matter. Like I would say almost, yeah, only
I agree.
5% probably.
I agree with
95% of people, it would not matter if we went to a CBDC, even though the politicians are making a big issue out of
you.
it. And they probably don't even know what a CBDC is, right?
They don't.
So they don't know. So for 95% of the people, it would not matter at all. And 95% of the world, it would not matter. I would say only 5% maybe it would matter. Like it doesn't matter to me whether we are on, because I look at it, the dollar is already digital. It doesn't matter. Like
Yeah, technically.
if we have an extra, what do you call, checks and balance on the dollar, saying that where this dollar transacted from, it doesn't affect me at all, right? It really doesn't affect me.
Hmm.
So probably I would say maybe the taxes, the write-off or something like that. But even there, I don't have much, so it really doesn't affect me beyond a certain point.
Yeah.
So
Taxation too is another
yeah,
one.
small business owners, maybe it'll kind of affect them quite a bit, because one of the biggest thing is where you can write off a lot of things, and under this, I don't know how it'll kind of work out, and if we have a digital dollar. But
Yeah.
other than
So
that,
it's a one tax, one currency, one tax
yeah,
associated with all of this, and it's just incredible how naive people really are to
yeah,
what's happening here.
yeah,
And you're absolutely right. 95% of the population, or even more than that, would not even understand the difference
yeah,
because
yeah.
it's already digital. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Hmm.
We are already digital. It would not even affect. I mean, I would say more like we're making the systems more efficient. If anything, it'll affect the 5% for sure.
Yeah.
People who have massive tax bills. I mean, I'm not one of them. People who have massive tax bills, it definitely would affect the 5%. I would say,
Hmm.
where or they basically have businesses which they don't want the governments to know and things like that. It'll probably affect them for sure.
Hmm.
But okay, so now going back to creating, and we are not going to get into Bitcoin versus XRP, and I know Twitter is flooded with that. We're not going
But
to go there. We're going to be decent people here, right? Going back to Bitcoin versus XRP, right? Or this coin versus that coin, Solana versus something else, God knows what not, right? The governments around the world are thinking about creating a reserve, right? One of the reasons that I see that you can create a Bitcoin reserve is because Bitcoin is used in many countries to transact, where there are war zones, and they used to transact and buy resources, right? That could be one of the reasons to hold on to Bitcoin for a government, right? So that you take the reserves out of the system. But why would like a president say that, hey, we're going to create this reserve? And Bitcoin intrinsically has no value. It's like a, what do you call, we are having a tulip moment with that. I personally feel that I mean, if you want to transact in Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's like the slowest network ever, like.
yeah.
But why is even the government supporting a tulip moment like this? Why? What is the reason?
Well, it's very interesting because if we look at Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, right? If you take Satoshi Nakamoto, people have tried this for so long, how to break it down really.
Yeah.
You actually, in Japan, you do everything backwards.
Hmm.
So when you take Satoshi Nakamoto and break it down, it actually says Central Intelligence Agency of China, basically.
Okay. Okay.
And we've talked about this before, I think so, maybe off record, but
Hmm.
that if you trace back Bitcoin's strategic origins, it was very strategic how it was introduced. It was certainly a Five Eyes intelligence agency operation. The white paper goes back to the National Security Agency, which is an institution you should not trust. They're the ones who gave us the Patriot Act after 9/11.
Yeah.
Um, so they realized people couldn't give up their freedom, right? So what
Hmm.
they do is they strategically put things into place to where you believe that you're beating the banks at their own game. So again, it was very strategic and aligned very well with QE. Um, Bitcoin strategic reserve is fiscally irresponsible.
Mm-hmm.
The notion of it is even a joke. It's not even funny, but it is kind of funny because it doesn't make any sense. It's not so strategic. What we see happening also is very interesting because we realize that the new financial order isn't really going to be about one dominant currency. I think it's about complementary systems that are targeting different niches in the global marketplace. And that's really where the ISO compliant technologies are central to that shift. And for your listeners out there, what does ISO 222 really mean? It's just an update for banks and financial institutions for those blockchain protocols to communicate with each other effectively. So hybridization. But these are the technologies that we think are backed by, of course, major institutions, regulators, and they're being integrated behind the scenes while everybody is touting Bitcoin, not to mention the marketing that goes into Bitcoin. Our research points to the emergence of a basket of reserve currencies as a practical solution to address all the varying issues that need to be addressed in the economy. So we believe it's not really about competition, it's about collaboration. And that's why we talk so much about Ripple and Stellar, for instance. We believe they're going to play the most unique and complementary roles in this framework that is yet to be seen. It's happening in a very strategic fashion that aligns with the geopolitical direction of the monetary system, the failing infrastructure, the threats against the BRICS, what they're trying to accomplish. So we're not speculating on a lot of this stuff. We understand what's been in the works for years, all right? We don't look at the mainstream narrative, and that's really what Bitcoin is. It's a mainstream narrative. It's a mainstream tool. So if you look at the bigger picture, though, as regulations do come into place, we're going to see the very foundation of a diversified and trust-based financial system being solidified. So we're going to see the emergence of a basket of reserve currencies that will serve as really the cornerstone to the system, addressing the needs of a multipolar world. The Bitcoin strategic reserve, that, in my opinion, is a massive distraction. It's very interesting at the same time. We do have Trump sitting down with Brad Garlinghouse. You guys saw that, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that Brad Garlinghouse is actually sitting with Trump in the White House, that tells a very different story too. They're also having these open discussions about putting an XRP strategic reserve. Well, it's interesting because an XRP strategic reserve is very strategic because it is also the only digital asset that is strategically positioned with all the big banks and the financial institutions, and most importantly, regulators. Regulation is key to seeing all of this technology actually unfold, to seeing this technology really kick off and see its value be recognized by the mainstream. So we go beyond just the Bitcoin narrative, the Ethereum narrative. We understand that as everything is being tokenized, and again, that includes stocks, bonds, debt, payments, BRICS, financial ecosystems, traditional currencies, stablecoins, I can go on. As we watch all of this unfold, we have to understand that it's happening in a very gradual and coordinated fashion that, again, aligns with the technologies that are ability to scale all of this. And if you cannot get enough scalable mass, you're not going to work out. So I'm telling you, Bitcoin, I know the price is high, and that's a whole different rabbit hole, which I teach. I've reported on that for years, and nobody is really putting the light on this thing. And there's a relationship between Bitcoin, Tether, the stable coin that is not so stable, and their nefarious activities, and the bond market. They're holding the bond market together while other countries are selling off the bonds, and they're using Tether to offset the loss of bonds so that the government has the bonds that are purchased there so they can issue new debt and use that new debt to strategically, like MicroStrategy, to buy Bitcoin. And that's artificially inflating the price.
So, so going back to this whole, a media narrative on Bitcoin or whatever you want to call it, right? And I understand now Bitcoin has become that currency which everybody recognizes, which the 95% of the world recognizes, right? So, and that's
the
why
problem.
you see,
Yeah, if
that's why you see
95% are recognizing it, I guarantee you they're walking into a trap.
Yeah. So 95%, so when I was studying finance many years ago, I was like, there is supply and then there is demand, right? And because everybody recognizes recognizes that Bitcoin is something which is like the cryptocurrency. Everybody's buying that, right? But they are not understanding that you cannot transact with this, you cannot do anything with this. It's called as the digital gold, which doesn't make sense to me at all personally either. For somebody who's read finance, right? It doesn't make sense to me. But it is held by some of the biggest companies, and we're not going to get into the rabbit hole of what BlackRock is or whatever, because it's kind of hard to define.
Mhm.
But we have ETFs, and we have now XRP ETF. I think Grayscale has filed for an XRP ETF as well. But we have ETFs coming out of these. I mean, which were the first ETFs that were filed, right, out of these coins. So why the necessity to actually? I mean, banks sell you all kinds of things. The Morgan Stanleys of the world, the Black, they sell you all kinds of things. But why a particular ETF on like specifically a asset like Bitcoin? I mean, for me, when I looked at it, I thought like, okay, maybe they just want to evaporate some of the reserves and keep it so that people are not misusing it. That's how I would look at it. But I don't know what your thoughts are.
I think first of all, an ETF kills the very inception of what blockchain was supposed to do for us.
Yeah,
It was heralded in, and
yeah,
this is again another narrative as well, but it was
yeah,
supposed to free us
yeah.
from intermediaries, from banks, financial institutions.
I
But
think
we know it's been co-opted.
yeah,
Go
but
ahead.
but I think an ETF is for those 95% of the people who don't know how to transact
Yeah.
using a wallet. And I am very tech savvy, and I find it very hard to actually transact with my ledger. My ledger stopped working the other day. It's like,
Wow.
okay, yes, my ledger stopped working the other day, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to keep this in ledger anymore. So now I
Mhm.
need to think about other alternatives, right? So I think if I am finding it so difficult, I have a undergrad in computer science, a master's in software engineering. If I'm finding it so difficult, so I cannot imagine what 95% of the humans feel, right? So how would they be transact? So an ETF makes sense for folks who don't know how to transact in this technology, right?
Sure.
Yeah, but then, like, what's the point of having an ETF over tech? I mean, first of all, I don't even call it a technology in my opinion anymore.
Mm.
What's the point of transacting in this, right? I mean,
There is no point. See,
yeah,
an ETF, first of all, let's start with the foundation.
yeah,
Number one, the technology was supposed to free us from Wall Street, from
yeah,
banks, from financial institutions. Okay. The whole Bitcoin community was all about that.
hmm,
And then guess what?
yeah,
ETF came
yeah,
and everyone supported it. So
yeah,
what happened to the very principles that you first acknowledged to begin with? They're out the window already. That's one.
yeah,
Shows you the hypocrisy of
yeah,
some of these people because they don't realize what they're talking about. That's
yeah,
one. The second thing, what is an ETF?
yeah,
It's only an open door for Wall Street to get involved. They
yeah,
have co-opted the space in such a way that people don't even recognize what it was supposed to do in the first place. That's
yeah,
the second thing. So an ETF is really going to open the door for Wall Street to co-opt this space and of course mislead people. The
mhm,
traditional ETFs that we already have before crypto were a way for them to funnel wealth to the top 1-2 percenters.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, you can manage your money in an ETF, but think about the cost of money, how much trillions of dollars that they're printing. So you can have your money in an ETF. You can have your very similar like a 401k. People put their money in a 401k. They spend the rest of their life letting their 401k grow. But guess what? By the time they cash out, they don't realize to get that 401k all the way up there and to make that value worth something, they had to issue all this debt. So by
mhm,
the time you cash out of a 401k, or if you get your money out of an ETF, guess what? The rate of inflation of how much money we're printing puts you right back where you started. So you
yeah,
lost. They
yeah,
won. There's no such thing as trickle down economics. What
yeah,
happens is they get the 1 and 2 percenters all the money and
mhm,
they spend it on all this stuff and they buy up all the assets that we can't afford to hold on to. And they
mhm,
completely devalue the currency by the time it gets to us.
yeah,
This is the same thing with an ETF. I don't even welcome an ETF for XRP. I think it's a
mhm,
very stupid thing, you know? Yeah, XRP is its own currency that I think eventually is going to be the bridge reserve asset where a basket of currencies will emerge out of that later on through
mhm,
stable coins and so forth.
yeah,
So I'm not a big fan of the whole ETF idea, whether it's Bitcoin or XRP.
mhm,
I don't tribalize against one currency. It's just I wish more people would understand
yeah,
what's really going on behind the scenes, but they don't want to research it because they
yeah,
don't have time. I get it. But
yeah.
This is
So
what we
I
do for a living. And
yeah,
I'm telling you, we found some things that doesn't make sense.
yeah,
They're telling the whole world to go look at Bitcoin. And the fact, again, that 95% of the people are actually looking at this stuff tells me that I should be looking somewhere else.
yeah. Yeah. So if so let now going back again to um, like our discussion on these different coins, right? And we create a reserve, right? We had I think the head of ECB or Europe, they said that they would not be having any such reserve, kind of a thing, right? Why is that? I mean, would they not have reserves of these ISO coins also, or why is that Europe has said such a blatant statement when the world's biggest power is saying that, hey, we are going to create a massive reserve of all of these? So, why there is like, I mean, I
Pushback.
understand we're in, yeah, yeah, why there's pushback, and I understand we are in a very different government regime right now, which is we are not following the traditional norms that we follow, right? Why there is this kind of pushback from Europe or the head of European nations?
Because they're all liars. They're all corrupt. And I'm not kidding about that. I have gotten to a point in my life where I get it now. I
Yeah.
see how the world works. I see how the politicians play their games. And I see how naive people are still.
Mhm.
They don't learn anything from the past. We
Mhm.
should be, we should really understand how things are playing out these days after what we've been already subjected to over the last 5 years, 4 years. Okay.
Mhm.
And this has been going on for a very long time. Politicians will say one thing and they do something else. Vindel and I at Black Swan Capitalists, we pay attention to what their actions are. We follow
Mhm.
their actions. I'll give you an example. The whole market is selling off today. Everybody in the crypto space is asking why, why. I'll tell you
Mhm.
why. It's
Mhm.
because the bond market is selling off. You see what I'm
Mhm.
talking about? No one's paying attention to the
Mhm.
details behind what's being discussed. So
Mhm.
politicians and the central banks have been colluding
Mhm.
since the pandemic. They've all been pushing the same agenda, whether they say something else, but their end game is the same. Okay,
Mhm.
their end game is very simple, and they will say one thing and they're doing something else entirely. We have documents. I'm not joking. We have documents that I possibly have sent you before, digital documents from the
Mhm.
International Monetary Fund, from the Bank of International Settlements, from the World Bank, from the United Nations,
Mhm.
saying that they are going to use these technologies for the new monetary system. Martin
Mhm.
Armstrong, good friend of mine, and I know a lot of economists and I have a lot of good connections nowadays.
Mhm.
They have told me off record mostly that the
Mhm.
IMF has the currency ready. Do you know what they're waiting for? And
Mhm.
they're just buying time through
Mhm.
all this conversation to still take more wealth from people because of the fear of missing out and then the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's a psychological game. But if
Mhm.
you look at the end game here, all right, it's very clear. All
Mhm.
central banks, whatever they're saying, their game is to devalue the currency, it's to widen the wealth gap, it's to create an inflationary environment where holding assets and cash becomes too expensive. This is going to
Mhm.
push people into a digital system, whether
Mhm.
they like it or not. Those who are on the right side of history and the right technologies are going to position themselves for a wealth transfer,
Mhm.
natural selection. Those who do not see what's going on, they're going to be issued a central bank digital currency at the time of their choosing. And
Mhm.
however they're going to orchestrate this financial crisis is a whole different discussion. Despite what Trump says, despite what the ECB says, it doesn't matter.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's the
So
reality of the situation.
yeah. So we have now two technologies, right? XRP and Stellar. And I think the United Nations endorsed Stellar, if I'm not wrong,
Yes. And
public,
XRP in the past.
yeah,
Mhm.
publicly, recently. So how do you see these two play out? Like, is it going to be Stellar, which is like it's going to be like a oligopoly kind of a situation, or how do you kind of see this like play out? I would say, like you would use both set of platforms, or how would that work?
Yeah. So I think it really comes to tokenization, right?
Mhm.
Let's start with XRP. When we talk about XRP, and we've been covering this since 2020, but our research did start in 2019.
Mhm.
We came across Ripple and we realized what they were doing. They were actively building the rails
Yeah.
um, So it's not just another financial technology company. What they've been doing is laying the very foundation for a new financial system, and they've been integrating all those payment rails directly onto what we already have existing in the system today. So they're layering this new technology called RippleNet on top of those payment rails of governments, central banks, and financial institutions. Let me tell you something, and for your audience, this is not about retail. It's about the 1% and 2%ers. They run the system.
Yeah, we'll talk about that next, actually. Yeah.
Well, they control the flow of capital. If they're essentially building the bridge to a fully tokenized economy, then let me tell you something. This goes way beyond crypto. This goes beyond speculation. This is then about tokenization. We're talking again, and I feel like a broken record. I keep repeating myself, but I've been doing this for years. So we're talking about everything, all value. So we can say stocks, we can say bonds, debt. We've covered this many times in the past. And what we're doing is watching this all unfold in a very gradual and coordinated fashion. Again, aligning with the BRICS nations, pushing their own financial independence, the narratives that you see from the pro-crypto administration for Trump. Both sides are using the same technology while playing cat and mouse together. And they're engaging in geopolitical maneuvering, if you will, to keep people distracted. But the end game is a two-tier monetary system. And I have the document for it. It's called Trust Bridges. Everyone can go look it up, your audience. Go to Google. Actually use Brave browser, by the way. It's better and safer too. But go to Google on Brave and search for IMF Trust Bridges. Okay. You read that document. If you interpret it correctly, it talks about how a two-tier monetary system is being put into play. All right. And the two-tier system falls into traditionally what we have already. You have central bank money, which is like physical gold reserves. All right. And then you have private money. Private money is the money that's already issued to us, the dollars, the cash that we have. That's private money. We talked about this in the beginning, right? So it's a central bank money and private money, which fall into a two-tier monetary system. We have videos for this to confirm it as well. And essentially, you're going to have one that falls like digital gold. And we believe that's where the relationship and correlation is with XRP, whether it's stablecoins or something along those lines, right? So as the dollar continues to diminish, we're going to see the demand for this kind of technology, for the Nostro Vostro accounts, the liquidity provision, that's going to increase, that's going to accelerate. And eventually, when it's recognized by mainstream, not by retail, that's when the value will reflect. All right. So XRP is central bank money. Plumbing. It's the plumbing for the new system. And XLM is really the one currency, what some people say, one world currency, whatever you want to call it, where they're issuing CBDCs on the Stellar network. At the same time, they handle P2P, peer-to-peer transactions. Right. So that's really what's being built. And we can go, of course, into detail with this stuff. So
and today we have very limited time, but we will go into details of this in another pod. So in all of this, where does, like, I know gold is now in Basel 3. I understand what Basel 3 is, right? Where does gold sit? Are we going to go back to some gold standard, or do you predict? I mean, I think now gold is around at $3,000 trading at, on market, right? I mean, if you're buying it 1 ounce kind of a thing. And that seems to be a fair price. I've seen your interviews with Andy, if I'm not wrong, and you guys are discussing gold. He's like a big proponent of gold. He has a commodity trading firm and everything. So I am curious, like, so in the new system, would we have something pegged to gold? Would it make sense? Or would it make more sense that we create a new kind of system, right? I mean, I studied inflation. I visited Brazil in business school, right? I studied inflation, and Brazil was trying to get into a new currency. Every country that goes into inflation does that. And historically, we have done this, right? If you have read historical patterns, kind of in it. So is it going to be pegged to gold, or is it going to be something which you're like, okay, this is a new form. This is the digital gold, and y'all, buy into this digital gold kind of a thing, right? And in the recent history itself, a lot of technologies have changed, whether it's AI, whether it's you want to call it crypto or whatever, digital assets. In my opinion, it's still digital assets, right? Where do you see that? Like, are we going to be pegging to a physical commodity, or is it going to be like a new order currency, which is going to be the new standard, like how dollar became the standard in 1971, if I'm not wrong. Nixon was the one who took it off the standard, right? So where do you see that kind of a thing as we are entering into this? It's clear now, right? With the president endorsing, we're going to basically go into this direction, and of an American president endorsing. So where do you see that?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. First of all, um, the new Treasury Secretary pick for the Trump administration only 3 weeks ago said, and I quote, "We need a realignment of the Bretton Woods." That's a very, very
Powerful
powerful
statement.
statement
Yeah,
coming
I
from the
agree.
Treasury Department.
Yeah,
And he said gold would play a role in this.
yeah.
I also have documents, and on my X account, if your people follow me on X, I have covered every like minute detail that is, in my opinion, some of the most significant statements ever made. And you have to be a real smart person to catch it and understand it, all right?
Yeah.
And we have videos of former central bankers saying that we are going back to some sort of gold standard. And many people will say, well, that's not going to happen. You're a traditional economist who, by the way, need to go back to school and get educated on how the world is going to work in the future.
Yeah.
And financial advisors, the same thing, tax advisors, they all need to go back to school and learn how the new rules are being put together.
Yeah.
And if you look at central banks too, and smart money, and when we talk about smart money, we're talking about those 1% and 2%ers as well. And it's really central banks who run the world. The real money is actually flowing. The wealthiest institutions and individuals are investing in, number one, utility-driven technologies like XRP, while simultaneously acquiring hard assets like gold. Even Russia came out saying that they're going to have a silver strategic reserve. Interesting. And gold and silver are being purchased. And as we go digital, we're going to need those commodities, all right? Gold and silver and precious metals is heavily involved in space travel, electronics, computer systems, et cetera, et cetera. So we can confirm that gold is going to play some sort of role also for the monetary system, which is why central banks are buying it, which is why in 2017, when the big banks got their SIFI label, where an institution is too big to fail, who's holding the bag? It's the people. All right. And at the same time, when they put that into motion and into law in 2017, SIFI, your people can go look that up. Jim Rickards talks about it a lot. And they were also reclassifying gold as a tier 1 asset class in 2017 at the same time. What does that tell you? Basically, Americans are holding the bag, the people basically holding the bags of the bonds that nobody wants all of a sudden because there's no confidence. And they're reclassifying it as a tier 1 asset class and buying gold and pressing on the gas.
Yeah.
What does that tell you?
Yeah.
Like you don't have to be a contrarian to figure this out, right?
Yeah.
So it's very obvious. And when we look at XRP, for instance, and other digital assets, now we see stablecoins being built on the XRP ledger. 2021, 2022, and 23, I covered that the World Gold Council was going to push for a stable coin that they said at the time, we haven't found a reliable source to issue a stable coin. Well, it's been revealed that that is the XRP ledger. Now you have the Treasury Department has a relationship with the XRP. You have the Federal Reserve talking about using XRP for instant payments on FedNow. All these little indicators are here and there. So the World Gold Council said that eventually they're going to have a stable coin. They didn't mention where it was going to be built. And the stable coin was going to be gold backed. All right. And that's what a stable coin is. You can technically peg it to a 1-to-1 ratio with a fiat currency, but then the currency is devalued. So what's the point? Or you can peg it to a hard asset, or you can have both. And that's really what RLUSD is. But more importantly, central banks are buying gold, and they're not buying it for no reason. They're buying it because they know where this is going. And as the debt continues to exponentially increase, you're going to need to solve that debt crisis one way or another in some time. There are only two ways to solve a debt crisis. Number one is you go to war. And we see that kind of stirring up now, and with Iran and Israel, which has, by the way, been co-opted by the United States and Israel. I don't want to get off topic. And so that's a possibility, the default. But the second thing is also the gold reevaluation. That's what Andrew Sheckman talks a lot about. And also one of his friends, Peter, I have a clip of him talking about the IMF said that they could potentially reset the gold price as well. So if debt is like this and you want to shrink it,
Yeah.
you reset the gold price to a
Yeah.
higher number. And people are like, that's not possible. Of course it is.
Yeah.
Clive Thompson, wealth manager, dear friend of ours,
Mhm.
he and his Swiss wealth managers, they got together and they did some mathematics and they said, well, let's see how we can really resolve the debt crisis globally, right?
Mhm.
What would gold have to reflect at? And guess
Mhm.
what they said?
Mhm.
They said gold would have to be at around $83,000 an ounce.
Wow.
Well, why are central banks buying gold? Well, why
Yeah.
are one percenters buying gold while 95%, as you say, are buying digital gold Bitcoin because it's a store of value? Well, let me tell
Yeah.
you, by definition, a store of value does not drop 40% in one day, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then go to 100% in 2 days. That
Yeah.
is not a store of value. So
Yeah.
that doesn't even make sense by definition.
Yeah.
The second thing is the 95% of the people are buying meme coins. You know what I'm talking about? They
No,
don't
I'm
know
rolling
what's
my
going
eyes
on.
right now.
They
Yeah.
don't know what's going on. And I'm not
Yeah.
trying to be I don't want to offend anybody, but people are clueless to what's happening in the
Yeah.
world. All right.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
trying so hard. Like you have no idea how tired I am of
Yeah.
all the work I've been putting in trying to help people understand this stuff for years and years.
Yeah.
And I'm getting burned out at this point. You
Yeah.
know,
So
some of my older videos are more relevant today than they were back then because it's
yeah.
all unfolding in real
And
time.
I'm sure like 1 year ago, I remember when we did the interview, right? I did it because I kind of knew like this is going somewhere, right? So and I work for a bank, so I'm aware of all the things that go on. Like, but 1 year ago, if somebody had heard you, they would have thought like, what is this guy talking about? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. People called. Okay. Let me tell you a fact. People ridiculed me so much in
yeah,
2021, 2022. And guess
yeah,
what? In
yeah,
2023, they started repeating what I've been saying
yeah,
and plagiarizing my work and
yeah,
repackaging it with AI. I'm not
yeah,
kidding. That's
yeah,
a
yeah.
fact. And these are
No,
now some of the biggest names in the XRP community.
yeah, I'm
So
aware. So I remember we spoke when it was our initial interview. I remember we spoke about, I said like, what gives you the courage to talk like this?
I
It
mean,
was,
yeah, we have an obligation to each other.
yeah,
I'm a very caring person.
yeah,
Some people think I'm otherwise. I'm not.
yeah,
I'm a very caring person. I have an obligation to humanity. I have an obligation to myself to do
yeah,
the research. As long as I'm doing the research for me and my family, I have an obligation to share it with my friends.
yeah,
I have an obligation to share it with YouTubers,
yeah,
with other individuals out there. I'm just trying to do the right thing. That's all.
yeah,
And I want people to see what's coming.
yeah.
I'll
So
tell you one thing also, I'm not wrong. I'm very early. And it's been
yes.
that way for years now.
Yeah, I think we are almost there. We are at the cusp of it. I think we are
Yes.
4 5 years away from everything. Even still, it's still early because people have not figured it out yet, which is the 95% of the people. The day 95% of the people figure it out, right? And I think it's going to be something else. I
Yeah,
think,
it's going to be
yeah,
painful, but that's why we're called Black Swan capitalists. We
yeah.
capitalize on Black Swan events because we're researching it in advance.
Yeah. So one last question, and I know we are at 43 minutes. I don't know how we are doing on the time as of now, but we can do this discussion in our next recording, next pod probably. It was to do with all the stable coins that are coming up. I understand there is a value for having RLUSD because
Mhm.
we have to transact in some kind of thing which is US dollar pegged, right? Kind of a thing, right? I understand that, and there has to be a bridge, and the bridge has to be smooth between the US dollar and the XRP bridge or whatever, right? But what about all these USDC? Jimmy Liar, I think he's a CEO of Circle, right? And then you have the likes of David Sachs, who's the czar of crypto, and
Mhm.
we have folks propagating stable coins, right? And to me, again, that doesn't make sense either. Right? Why would you want to have more stable coins? But okay, but I'm curious what your thoughts are, and I think that's the last question, and we'll do it. We'll do another pod again.
Sure. And I
Yeah,
think in response to a crisis, like Ripple has already been quietly, we talked about this, building the
yeah,
infrastructure that's going to play a role in stabilizing financial
yeah,
markets. When I say
yeah.
stabilizing, stable coins, it's
Hmm.
in the name, right? So
Yeah.
one of the solutions we saw emerge is RLUSD. It's a stable coin that's designed to really help the governments and institutions not just tokenize their debt,
Hmm.
but it's there to provide the mechanism for debt issuance and leverages the blockchain itself. So that
Hmm.
also does provide value to the XRP. We're going
Hmm.
to see more stable coins. RLUSD is a tokenized version of the dollar, right? It's a
Yeah,
digital dollar essentially. I
yeah.
believe in time we're going to see a real yen. We're going
Hmm.
to see a real euro eventually.
Yeah,
And I've commented on this on X
yeah,
because these are digital currencies. These are stable coins that have the one-to-one ratio with their traditional currencies, and
yeah,
that can assist not just in managing and tokenizing debt. It fundamentally solves the underlying problem of excess debt and declining dollar value while still bridging us into the new system.
yeah,
And that's really what it's there. It's a temporary bridge to ease the immediate pressure that's associated with the core issues that are still there because of the financial system and this unsustainable debt cycle.
yeah.
Does that make sense? So
That,
it's just, yeah, it's just buying time.
yeah,
But eventually, like I said, remember, it's going to be a regional currency one day.
yeah.
If we have a real yen and we
Hmm.
have a real euro and we have a real ruble, for instance, I'm just speculating now, right?
Hmm.
They already said they're going to make a real yen. They actually did, yes. So if we have all these stable coins of those regional currencies, then who is the reserve currency? XRP.
Yeah, but we definitely can get into like deeper in this conversation, but I don't understand why would somebody like Circle want to have USDC. You see what I'm saying? They have nothing else going on for themselves,
Yeah,
and
well, we have to wait. There are things that are yet to be revealed.
yeah,
Give you an
yeah,
example, like Tether.
yeah,
Tether is a stablecoin with very nefarious ties to all
yeah,
kinds of stuff. I would
yeah,
not want to say it on this call, and I've
yeah,
researched this stuff and have videos about it on Rumble because it's not even allowed on YouTube.
yeah,
So if you check my Rumble account, Black Swan Capitalist, you'll find them there. I have
yeah,
a detailed video about the nefarious activities involved in Tether. That's a stable coin. It hasn't crashed yet. Do you know
mm,
why Bitcoin's price is so high? It's because of Tether. Do you know why 90% of the cryptocurrencies that have no use case are out there? It's because of
mm,
Tether and even
mm,
Ethereum. So if Tether was to collapse,
mm,
90% of the market would get wiped out and Bitcoin would have a significant retracement to
mm,
nothing. It would bleed the markets dry. And at the same time, it would crash the banking system because all that unbacked exposure in crypto is
mm,
associated with it. It just cascades, right?
mm,
So this hasn't been revealed yet. Over time with Circle, let them do their thing. But
mm,
over time, what's going to happen is that they're going to find out that it's cheaper, it's faster, it's more scalable, and that's really where all the money is going. And eventually, money flows from one project and it will move into something else when it's recognized. So we
mm.
believe in time we're going to start to see this stuff emerge
Okay, so there will be many more stable coins that'll
on
come
the XRP ledger.
on the XRP ledger. Okay, got
Yes,
it.
and
Of
and
course,
and Stellar Network as well.
and Stellar Network as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely think Stellar. I've seen observed the project from the very beginning. They are on.
They're
They, yeah,
very big, and they're
yeah,
very quiet, and
yeah,
that should tell you something.
yeah. They're very quiet. They're more quiet than XRP Ripple, I would say for sure.
Yeah, well, we made the noise, so yeah.
Anyways, all right, perfect. And that's all I have for today. And thank you for coming. And we're short of time today, but I would definitely love to talk more about stable coins at some point, and we'll do another pod on that. Thank you
Yeah,
so much, Virsan, and thank you for all the work that you do. I don't know how you do it, but
I
that's
don't know either.
yeah, I have no idea how you do it because I would never be able to do it for sure. Yeah. Anyways, thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, and thank your audience. So, yeah.
Yeah.